Sex Talk with the Siegel Brothers is a weekly program designed to answer all your questions, including the ones you didn't even know you had, and to clarify the endless debates around the wonderful and fascinating world of sexuality. Join us for real talk about sex from two experts in the field. Richard and Larry Siegel have over 50 years of experience as sex therapists, educators, counselors, and researchers. The Siegel brothers are recognized around the world as trainers of medical and mental health professionals.
Hello and welcome to Sex Talk with the Siegel Brothers. I'm Dr. Ricky Siegel, a certified sex therapist.
And I'm Larry Siegel, a clinical sexologist and certified sexuality educator.
And my super awesome big brother.
And it's still my favorite role.
Toast to you. Cheers.
Cheers, my brother.
Our ritual sake toast, and we raise our cups to you for joining us. Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us on
Indeed.
Sex Talk. And we'd be so grateful if you would subscribe to our YouTube channel and, of course, likes and shares on Facebook. And we would love to hear your comments down there below.
Yeah, questions, comments, feedback, whatever it is. We would really, really love to hear from you. So please do.
So,
been an interesting week. All right, coming off 4th of July.
Mm-hmm.
Right, if we were in a classroom, the first thing I usually do in a classroom coming off of 4th of July, just have a little raise hands.
Who's lost fingers
That's
over
right.
the holiday weekend?
That's right. So hope you all had a good 4th weekend. Glad that it was relatively uneventful.
Well, and we had to whoever in Larry's neighborhood who spent as much on fireworks as the city. Thank you very much.
Yes, we really enjoyed the show.
Awesome display.
Thank you. And thank you for keeping it at the end of the block. So nothing blew through the windows.
Right.
That was good. But it was fun. It, really kind of debated about doing something, not doing something.
Dealing with crowds.
And we ended up having a great time. So, it all worked out well.
Yeah.
So, another week for Sex Talk.
And as we always say, there's never a shortage of things to talk about. I love to tell my students and supervisees that this is a field where you could study it for 200 years and never finish.
That's right.
There's always some other aspect of it's sexuality. It's us. It's our humanness, our very humanity. We're sexual beings. But that being said, our topic for tonight is a sometimes controversial, more often confusing, and apparently emerging, though nothing's new under the sun, sexual orientation, or lack thereof, known as, under the broad term, asexuality. Or a or an as a prefix, meaning no or none, no sexuality.
Right, without sexuality, which is a confusing concept, especially given how many times we say things like, we are sexual beings, regardless of what we do.
Right.
We are sexual beings from the moment of conception until we die.
Right. We have sexual parts that do things, sometimes seemingly of their own accord, because of the main sex organ of the body being here between our ears, and sexual thoughts and fantasies and feelings and dreams and urges. None of these things are chosen. People don't say, oh, I'll be horny now because I'm bored, right? Or I'll have a sexual thought about someone I see in the airport in a sea of faces, right? We don't choose these things. We notice them.
Right.
Same as any kind of attraction, same as orientation. Homophobes love to ask gay people, why would you choose that? Yeah. And a lot of gay people often respond with, why would anyone in their right mind choose something that's just like an open invitation for discrimination and prejudice and bigotry and sometimes in much of this country legally sanctioned?
Yes.
So it's tough. It's tough for anyone. We talked a lot with our guests. We will be sharing our interview with the wonderful Dr. Deborah Grayson, our dear old friend. And we talked a lot about identity and identities and identity politics and the importance of working clinically with someone, especially someone who is distressed over their perceived sexual identity. We have to find out what these things mean to that person or that couple and not assume.
That's right. That's right. And, and as much as we talk about how flexible things like gender and sexual identity really is, and that's a true statement. It really is a very flexible kind of concept. However, I think people's relationships with their identities can also be very, very flexible. And this idea that just because somebody identifies themselves in a particular way does not make that gospel, does not make that an absolute truth.
Right.
And again, this idea of being able to question. When we look at something like asexuality, as well as other stated identities, it's part of our professional responsibility to help people navigate where that might be, turns out that that's a real legitimate road for them to go down. That really is who they are. But how many times do we see that those kinds of identities are sort of a defensive type of posture? Especially now with a lot of young people. What are the rules about a relationship? What are the rules about sex right now? What are the standards about who we are? It's become so confusing for a lot of people that I think there's a kind of default, not quite shut down status that some people have. Right? And it's just easier to say, you know what, I'm just not interested. Right? Now, again, I am saying this on top of saying that for many, many people, this really is a legitimate identity. I was going to say orientation, but it's a lack of orientation.
Right, yeah. We're talking about people who completely deny any horniness, any preoccupation or thoughts about sex or wanting to have sex or, again, seeing someone and feeling sexual thoughts. And others, as we talked about with Dr. Grayson, others who do have an erotic life but don't want to be in a relationship.
Right.
So asexual and aromantic are terms that are sometimes used to compare and contrast.
That's right. And one of your favorite terms as well, we can throw in there that demisexual and that term allosexual, which kind of do trigger both of us a little bit. But this idea of, having these shades of gray, if you will, which is absolutely normal. But I'm gonna stand by something I've said before and said many, many times since, and will say many times probably. But not everybody gets to have their own flag. I think there's such a sense of me. What about me? What about me? I'm a lesbian and I may be trans, but I'm left-handed. So what about me and all those other people that it's not just like regular lesbians or regular trans people. We're left-handed. We're different. And that's where I have a problem. Right?
Yeah.
That's where I think it gets to be a little bit too much. And I think the important point is that, that's kind of our job. Right? Not to just accept out of hand what people diagnose themselves with. Right. And I know I'm using the pathology language in this context, but I'm using this on purpose. People come in with their own characterizations, with their own diagnosis, and it really is not for us to just accept at that face value.
We ought to be diagnosticians, and a favorite quip about this is our friend and colleague and friend of the show, Doug Braun-Harvey, who talks about clinicians who suffer from PE, premature evaluation.
Yeah.
And there's so many of these sexual, just self-diagnosed or partner-diagnosed sexual problems that people bring into therapists, and therapists say, okay, right? And just, like you said, take at face value. And the comparison to someone walking into an oncologist and saying, I have cancer. And the oncologist saying, okay, let's start the chemo. Instead of saying, no, well, I'm the professional, with all due respect. This is my area of expertise. I'd like to know why you think you have cancer. Are there signs and symptoms of cancer? And let's run some tests to confirm whether or not. And then I will tell you the diagnosis of whether or not you have cancer.
Right. And it very well may be. It very well may be that they do in fact have cancer, but that can't be our starting point. Right? We arrive there.
Yeah.
And again, that's the work. And it should not be seen with disrespect. It should be seen as a way to actually help strengthen the relationship that person has with their identity. Because nobody's helping anybody if they're just sort of complicit in their emotional cover-up. Right? That this could be, maybe it really is an intimacy issue that they have. Something changed in the relationship, or a relationship itself is threatening for them. And this sort of emotional cover-up that can, I think that asexuality as a label can be used for. If we don't challenge that, I think we're doing them a disservice.
Yeah, like you said, at least rule it out. Yeah.
Yes. So I'm really excited to talk with our guest tonight. She's, as you said, somebody we go way, way back with. Dr. Deborah Grayson specializes in not only sex therapy, but hypnosis and hypnotherapy, bereavement counseling. And one of the things that I think she turned me on in the very, very beginning too, because I think she was the first therapist I ever met who also specialized in expressive art therapies and poetry therapy in particular. So she basically works with all kinds of individuals. She's worked with a lot of asexual people, a lot of non-binary, a lot of the gender diversity that we hear. So she really is, I think, just an ideal person to have this conversation with.
And a dear friend.
And truly just somebody we'd love to talk to, I have to say. So without any more ado, why don't we go ahead to our interview with Dr. Deborah Grayson. And here we are. I am so happy to bring to you all. We are so happy to bring to you all one of our favorite people.
One of our oldest and dearest sexology friends.
Indeed. In fact, to give you an idea how far we go back, my first supervisor, when I first began in this field and started making that transition into sex therapy. So we go back to what, 1990, 92, something like that?
90s.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of the hairstyle. You know, I don't think it was quite out to here, so it wasn't quite 80s hair. Yeah, it might have been late 80s, early 90s.
Yeah, it was. And, you know, again, we hear people say things like this all the time, but you really have not changed a bit.
I was just going to say, you look exactly the same to me, but I think we both have the same lens and both need our eyes checked, perhaps, you know.
Really long hair and a beard. And
yeah, that's it. The little scar down the middle. We all wore it the same way, you know, males, females, didn't matter.
So after all of this time, it is so great to still have you in my life, in my profession as well.
Thank you. Likewise.
It's something that we do cherish.
Dr. Grayson is an esteemed sex therapist in Boca Raton, and also, as we said in the intro, faculty at Lynn University for many, many years.
15.
Nice. Yeah.
Nice. And we are so excited to talk to you tonight about what's really kind of, let's just call it a fuzzy category of identity for a lot of people. It's something we've been hearing more of in the last couple of years. Yet I haven't really found anybody that can really explain it, including people who are identifying as it. Right?
In the what's become often known as the alphabet soup of sexual identity and gender and orientation, the LGBTQQIA GNC2S. The A is for asexuality.
Yes.
And in my clinical practice, I've seen folks who identify that they just say they don't have a libido, they don't get horny, they don't think about the other gender, their own gender, they don't feel. But I've also, and this is what I'd really love to hear you talk about, Deb, I've talked to people who do have desire, who do have sexual fantasy, who may even have a solo sex life, but just don't want anything to do with partnered relationships, and they call themselves asexual as well. So
yes, they do.
With the first millennials and now the Gen Zers, every generation defines and redefines. So now there's like an ace banner, as it's sometimes shorthanded, asexual, and these terms that get thrown around, again, some of them seem new, some of them, everything old is new again. Demisexual, aromantic.
And allosexual, which is, you know, a part of
whatever happened to HB, you know, human becoming, or even human being, you know, the older form of, you know, rather than evolving, you know, you stay static. Okay, HB, I think that's important too. But yes, I do hear you. I think there's a positive twist to something, though, from what you're saying, that they're at least identifying that there's something to identify. They're doing their own research on what it means to them. And some of them look at it as a freedom, as you already know. You know, they have freed themselves from a certain label or expectation. I think it has a lot to do with expectation. And if you're asexual, it's like, oh, I'm not going to bother them. You know, they don't have the same kind of desire or thinking or romantic label that I might have, you know. And maybe they're that way solo, but not so with a partner, if they choose to have one from time to time, or from decade to decade. Some people just don't see sex as an ultimate focus or all-consuming thing, like some people that eat to live but don't live to eat. That's an interesting analogy, isn't it? Well, that kind of factors into it too.
Very well.
Yeah, it's an apt one.
So asexual people, right, are, just to put a basic definition to it, are people who generally identify as not having any sexual or erotic feelings, but, well, actually, I should take that back. Sexual, they may have erotic feelings.
Right.
They have romantic, love-like feelings.
Right. They can be affectionate, yes.
So it's really just drawing a line between everything else and simply sexual feelings, or what we would just call purely sexual feelings.
Right. Pretty much. You just nailed it. Now, what do we do with that?
Okay.
So it's kind of like,
how do we put that in a context, given that so many people define it in so many different ways?
So it's kind of like, okay, so let's imagine that we are with someone who has proclaimed themselves to be asexual, and we're out on a date, and we might be getting a message that looks like this. And then we ask for some clarification. They go, oh, okay, I understand. You were confused because of blah, blah, blah. So they go, okay. And then they talk to you again, and then you get, I'm not ambidextrous. Did I do it that way? And then you get this message, or the opposite, right? It's still the same thing. We still don't know how close, and we don't know how far. So they have to update us. You know, okay, so you want to kiss, but you don't want a romantic kiss. you want a more companionate kiss, or you just want to cuddle. You're not thinking in a sexual way. So you don't want me to make comments like, oh, you're so hot. That's off the table. Okay. So you may have to navigate it through language as well as actions. You may have to say, okay, you like this, but not that. And how are you going to let me know if I overstep a comfortable boundary? Because I don't want to lose our connection, whatever connection that might be. And by the way, is connection okay? How do you like to connect? Is hugging all right, but genitals touching off the plate? I mean, sometimes you have to navigate like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that's pretty powerful because I imagine that the individuals themselves would often get confused. Some of this because I can't help but see, and this is what's a little confusing to me, to be honest with you, when I hear people say yes, they are asexual, they're not interested in any kind of sexual activity with somebody else, but they like making out or kissing and getting turned on. And that confuses me, that if they enjoy being turned on, for me, those are sexual and erotic feelings, but they draw a line in not wanting to act on them.
So let me ask you, as a colleague, if you were in that situation, there we are, we're all on the same date with the same person, which would be really freaky too, right? And we're not even going to go there. And they're saying this, right? I want to know how you would react, as a person in this little tryst, and I want to know how you would react as well. I think it's going to be two different things because I know you both. All right. Mm-hmm. What are you going to do, Larry? I'm turning this around to you.
Yeah, that's a really tough question. I think I would probably need a lot of clarification. In all honesty, I would probably be confused in that moment and would really have to stop and try to get myself to a place where I understand where they're coming from. I'll be honest with you, there's probably a part of me, and I don't know that I would say this to somebody in a session,
I know where you're going.
That would want to tell them, use a different word. Right?
That's not what I thought you were going to say.
I don't know that I would say that out loud, but it would confuse me, and I would have to stop and have them determine what my next steps would be.
Okay, you surprised me. Good. I'm glad. I thought you were going to say something totally different. I'm saving it. Okay. What would you say, Ricky? I got it.
What would I say to someone who identified as asexual?
Yeah, and there you are out on a date, and you're into kissing, everything is cool, and then they're like, okay.
Listen.
A more clinical setting? No, we're on this big group date.
Oh, yes. I missed that part.
See,
that's okay.
I've really done quite an evolution on this over the course of my career. Because as you know, when I first started, I started by taking over his old job as a sexuality educator.
Right.
And really felt strongly like, no, we're all human beings. Human beings are sexual beings. Something must have happened to you. When were you, right? Who broke your sexuality?
Yeah.
Right.
And as a sex therapist, after all these years, I've come to see that I was just wrong in thinking that way, that my bias in thinking that, and like in a dating thing, I think most people, especially nowadays, there's so much innuendo and colloquial, the thinking is if you accepted the date in the first place, then
right. That was my first point. Yes.
Mm-hmm. I have a reasonable expectation that you're interested sexually. Otherwise, you wouldn't have accepted the date.
Right.
So I think, like Larry said, it would turn me to go, well, okay, so then
maybe we should stop here.
What are we doing?
Or just, what's the
intention?
Boundaries, right? Yeah.
So that's exactly what I wanted to focus on. That in order to have our clarification, like you said, Larry, And in order to know about intentionality, we need to know, okay, so what's the end game here? It's kind of nice to get to know one another, and I want to respect you, and I want to be with your company. I love your company. How am I going to go from point A to point B? What is a point B? Or do we just stay at point A? Is this where we're going to be? And is that the kind of relationship we're going to have? And then you get to decide whether that works for you or not. It's different, the chemistry with everybody. There are some asexual people that we're going to get along with better than other asexual people. And it depends where we are in our life, what our goals are. If we're looking for a permanent partner, that might be perfect if we are also asexual, or we understand where that person is coming from. I remember a long time ago, so speaking, there's a little segue, but not so much. My dad had prostate cancer, and that's not what he died from, thank God. But I went with him and mom to the urologist. As a sex therapist, I wanted to know what was going to happen, you know, because I know dad and mom enjoyed, well, at least 3 times anyway that I know of, having relations. And they were they were together 50 years. They were very romantic with one another. Always. They adored one another. And I remember asking the urologist, well, how is this seeding that you're talking about going to affect dad's sex life? And he said, well, you know, there's going to be some difficulty, and he's not going to be able to this. He's not going to be able to that. And mom chimed in with, oh, well, that's fine. I used it all up anyway. And I was like, whoa, back up. You can't make that declaration for dad, mom. That's not fair. That's not fair. You might be ready for a life without sex in that way, but you really have to check in with dad. And he said, you know, if it's to save my life, I might consider it. But what I want to know what the other options are. And I think asexuality can be like that too. Like, is it life-saving for that person? Is it life-saving for this person who's also involved with that person? We have to look at the whole kit and caboodle, whatever caboodle is.
Exactly.
See, that you put your hair.
Very much the kind of part of my thinking around this as well. That, you know, certainly I would never say, no, you're not, when somebody says you are, you know.
Oh, right.
I would never say that, of course. But I want to check. You know, I use the same logic that we often use in disputing a lot of the sex addiction stuff. You know, we often criticize people
versus compulsivity. What does it mean?
The client comes in and says, I am this, and these therapists say, just okay, and let's go with it. But we have that's our job to question that, to make sure that it is, I think, a legitimate connection that they're making with themselves. And I see the same thing with asexuality. And you just sort of hit on a piece that really does sort of stick in there for me on all of this. What if you do have a couple that have been together for a long time? They have had what we would consider a typical sexual relationship, and now there is illness, right? And they're not seniors, right? But now there is, you know, well, let's say one of the partner has gone through some kind of illness. And they've come through on the other side, but now they are identifying as asexual, and some would even say have become asexual. How do they, it's a whole nother kind of discordant couple, right? One is identifying asexually, the other is not. They want some kind of sexual interaction between them. So how do we help couples navigate that disparity?
Well, I guess you have to look at what is the overall value of the relationship, number one. What else is it comprised of? If somebody is saying I am asexual, but it's not personal, that's another thing. It's like, I'm the only one here, you know. You know, don't take it personally, but I'm asexual. I mean, you know, those two sentences don't really go together. I think there's two different conversations. One is to talk about how that person is identifying and how it helps them, because it can deepen the relationship too. It doesn't have to be a horrible thing. It's like couples, it's similar in that couples that find that they can't have children and they really wanted children, they adapt, they find other ways. Well, should we adopt? Well, should we this? Should we that? I think the same kinds of questions go on with asexuality, such as, well, is this a temporary thing or a permanent thing? Are you saying that because you've just had so much of it and you need a break? Are you saying that because you want to put your focus on your doctoral studies and you don't want to pressure yourself or me or anyone else? I mean, what does it really mean? Are you in a deep cleanse, a deep sexual meditative cleanse? Are you going on retreat? Is this your way of staying loyal to your religion? I mean, it could be so many different pieces. So I would want to know, what do you mean? What, not like in, what do you mean? Right. Very different context, but what do you mean by your label, you're calling yourself asexual? What does that mean for you? And have you thought about what that means for us? And have you thought about what this relationship is? You know, someone who's in a committed relationship, it's not uncommon actually to go through periods of asexuality. Yeah. They call it something else. A hiatus or abandonment.
or you know, there's a lot of phrases that we often use for this.
Cheating, lots of things.
You're bringing to mind another kind of turnaround I had after years and years of thinking one way. It was a dramatic 180 after hearing Kate Bornstein speak at the Alt Sex Conference in New York a couple of years ago. And
sorry I missed that.
Yeah, all my years as a sexuality educator and, you know, whatever kind of dogma or epistemology, you know, accumulated, my sense of the concept of sexual identity was that it was a private, internal thing, that everybody decides for themselves how they understand their sexuality. And what I heard Kate say is, she said it's quite the opposite, that once we talk about identity as a noun, the verb is identify. So with what or whom are you identifying? And that makes it a very public,
an active oriented, yes,
beautiful thing. Mm-hmm. So, and one other point, I want to like bust us, our little cranky old man moment, with that meme thing, remember on Facebook, right? There was, you know, rainbow flag, and right, of course, right, you know, being around as long as we have, we assumed that we got the point that it was intended to represent every color under the sun, the entire spectrum. But no, apparently the rainbow flag is restrictive because there was like 25 other flags underneath. Yeah. All of the, you know, the identity politics or the tribal, I don't want to sound like I'm missing it, but after all of these, a dozen or so flags, then there was a dozen or so comments, like, again, where's the demisexuals flag? Like, how many, right? And then finally, people, we've been hearing, again, mostly Gen Zers, identifying as asexual because they say that they don't want to have sex with someone until they get to know them well. And there's a part of my head that just says, that's not a thing. That's how it was supposed to used to always work. Remember, again, we talked that it's that flipped script, right? That's how it used to be. It used to be you wanted to get to know somebody to see if you have sex with them. Now, you know, especially with young people, they have sex with them to see if they want to get to know them. Right. But that is the way it used to be.
Or you get to know them and then you decide you don't want to have sex with them and you become asexual. How is that different from just making a decision that you're just not interested in that person? I mean, we could really split so many hairs. I think the main thing is to understand what that means to that person, number one, because everybody identifies differently. my name is Deborah. Does that mean I'm not going to answer if somebody calls me Deb or Debbie or, little Deb versus big Deb, or, they're all, part of the same thing. How do you want to be called? How do you want to be known? How do you identify? Why is that identity so important to you? Those names are important. So I think I can't speak as an asexual person. So there, I just outed myself.
Yeah.
However, if I would want people to understand what I mean by it. Not by, let me Google it. Let me see what that definition is. And let me see if I can fit myself into it. It's a self label that needs description from that person.
Mm-hmm.
This is what being asexual means to me.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Do you have many people who identify as asexual in your practices?
I have not. And Larry doesn't practice.
Yeah, I don't practice, but I have people in classes that once in a while will come up. But again, it triggers a cranky old man moment for me whenever I hear that. If I'm in a classroom and somebody in my class, and this is somehow works in the opportunity to identify as asexual, my first instinct is, who cares? Who you are attracted to or not. And I think maybe that's what drives my crankiness with a lot of this stuff, especially and with all the other pronouns, because if I'm talking to you, I'm talking to you. I'm going to refer to you as Deb or Deborah or doctor, not he or she or they or whatever. So I see so much of this labeling and identifying. Again, I preface this as cranky old man. Pretty much this sort of narcissism that I think maybe going a little too far, right? With some of this, what we have not acknowledged for so long, and I think this is true anytime you have a pendulum that is stuck on one side. When you finally let it go and let it start swinging, it tends to go too far over to the other side for a bit.
So you're saying, if I'm hearing correctly, and I think I am, that it's something that for the cranky old man to stay inside on a personal level. If you're on one-on-one with someone, it's more pertinent then. But in a mixed crowd, it's like, who needs to know? If you're not talking about your horoscope, for example, you say, oh, by the way, I'm a Gemini with a Scorpio moon rising. Yeah, it might be the same kind of a thing, right? Like, who needs to know that? We're not even talking about that. Versus if you're having a personal relationship, then that's when something like that would need to be known, because you don't know where to go in this relationship. It's like, okay, wait, before we go any further, I just need for you to know, kind of a thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Kind of like that.
Yeah. And I think the last 20 years of life online with social media and everybody kind of presenting their best avatar, and I think more than ever,
their best avatar.
And a real need for.
I have to quote you on that. It's so true. Oh my God.
More than ever, people have been tribal. People need their people, and there's security and safety, and again, it is a lot about the political these days.
Yeah, and I get the fact that, especially with certain groups of people, there's no question that there have been sexual identities that have been marginalized and worse, far worse. And I brutalized and embrace the notion that visibility is legitimacy.
Right. That's an excellent point, and I really think that's what it's about.
This is my butt. This is where it sort of crossed over for me. All of that being said, I see a lot of this also as kind of like a Me Too in the worst way.
Yeah, kind of like, okay, I just want you to know that I matter also. And even though I'm not gay, even though I'm not trans, even though I do have an identity, I do have something that, that's different about me. And I want you to know, because it matters. I'm not the only asexual person. It's a real thing. I'm not making it up. And it doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with me either. I think we get too close to therapizing and pathologizing people where there isn't anything wrong. It's just a given. It's just, that's my name, that's my height, that's my weight, it's just part of them, It's the color of my eyes. It's just, that's how I am. That's how I'm made.
It comes up in supervision a lot, this kind of battle in my head between the sex therapist that lives in there that likes to be affirming and permission giving and sex positive, and that psychotherapist that's always looking for etiology and what happened and how is this, how did you get I've gotten better over the years of letting the sex therapist tell the psychotherapist to sit down and shut up.
I think it's great, the partnership that the two of you have, because you're each other's other halves in that way, and you have such great debates between one another. I really miss taking your seminars, especially when you present together, because then I don't have to decide. It's not like, oh, I can go to this one and then quickly run because it's at the same time, So when you're doing, psychopharmacology, it's like, yes, right. Yeah. I miss going to those, fever pitch seminars.
We're going to need conferences.
Looking forward to Tampa next year.
Yes.
Tampa next year. Ooh.
ASEC.
What month?
June.
That's what I thought.
Yeah.
Oh, this is a possibility. All right.
Sure, and hopefully our South Florida sex therapist group will start meeting in person again soon, and we'll be able to see you and maybe get together for dinner or drinks or something. It's been too long.
It's been too long.
Yeah. It has been. I know. This is crazy. This is nutty. I'm grateful for it. Don't get me wrong. Thank goodness you're both healthy, and or at least you're playing the act of the healthy people really well. I can only see this much of you, so I don't know. I don't think you're missing limbs, but I'm imagining a whole person beyond this little screen.
So to kind of sort of bring this discussion, I think, to a wrap, you've said some really important things, I think, about what this concept is like. So to kind of bring it to a close, because I know, and I know we've all heard people, and there are plenty of people out there who maybe in the beginning of their relationship, maybe at some point in their relationship. But I just want to just sort of go back to what you were saying before about when you find yourself, or when somebody finds themselves in those kinds of discordant relationships where there is such a discrepancy, not only in the levels of desire. We talk about discrepant sexual desire, until the cows come home, but this is different. This is not about discrepant desire. This is about
absence,
sexual intentions for that. Yes. So is just to build on the point that you were making about, find out, really have that conversation. What is it you want in this relationship? The partner who doesn't identify as ace, what are the questions they need to ask themselves? I know you've mentioned a couple about, what is important for you here, but you gotta just sort of just bring this as a wrap for people.
So some of the questions are, can I maintain a loving, deep kind of a relationship with this person as a non-asexual person? Can I do it? It's like monogamy and polyamory. I get a lot of that in my office, right? And they're like, how can this relationship work? Well, what are the parameters that you go by? What's allowable? What isn't? The same kind of question for somebody who identifies as asexual or bisexual or any label. What does that mean to you as an individual? What does it mean for us? What does it mean for us now as well as later? Is this permanent or is it just for now?
Mm-hmm.
Because
Excellent.
that's another thing. Some people go in and out of certain identities also.
And the negotiation that doesn't get talked about enough.
No.
Yes.
No, they just kind of say, here's the internal. So I call it parentheses thinking. The things that we think the other people know it, but it's like on the inside. I call it on the inside. There was a comedian, I think his name was Rob Becker. He used to say, there are two conversations I have with my wife. One is, you stupid, blah, 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 on the inside. And on the outside, okay, honey, whatever you do, just don't yell. I'll make caca. So hilarious guy, right? So the parentheses are the things that we have to talk about out loud. We have to bring those inner thoughts and inner voices to the outside, put it on the table and say, okay, let's look at this. So it's not so scary and it can be clarified. We have to know what the person means by that. I can do this, but not that. We can do this, but not that. And we're okay with that, or we're not okay, or we're okay for a week, maybe. Let's have a trial, see what happens, because I want to respect you, because it certainly isn't about forcing. It certainly is not about, oh, I'm going to change the person. Oh, they just haven't had me yet. Oh, please. It's like, yeah, they say that they identify as this, but that's just because they haven't, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. Ego's got to disappear. And we just have to show up as the human becomings that we are, and have compassion and have respect and have curiosity. I think that saves a lot of relationships, to be curious about the person that you're in a relationship with, and to be constantly surprised in pleasant ways by them. To be in the framework of catching them in the act of doing something good. Now there's a twist, right?
Love it.
You want me to do what? Catch my spouse in the act of what? Catching them in the act usually is not a good thing, right?
Right. Well, that's what I do. We've said to parents for many, many years, and it's just as true. We forget the same things that kind of should rule how we speak to kids is sometimes the way we need to speak in our relationships too, in terms of honoring things and not wanting to spook them and inviting rather than attacking, all those other kinds of things. So,
right. So start with the definition. That's where I would start. Oh, okay. You say that this is a name that you're going by. What does that mean? Where does that name come from? Oh, was that inherited? Was that your grandma's name? Was that your grandma's point of view? I mean, who knows where they got it from? But it doesn't. Now I'm going to speak to the clinical brain for a second. Not that you don't have one too, Larry. It doesn't have to be about pathology, but that doesn't mean it isn't. It can also be tied into pathology. So I don't want to rule that out either, but we have to explore. We have to see, oh, what does that mean? That's interesting. Tell me more about that.
Being the sex detective.
Yes, absolutely.
There you go. I like that.
Yeah.
I think Michael Perlman came up with that one.
Yeah, the sex detectives.
So thank you so
much.
We could go on, but we gotta hop off here.
All right.
Yeah, let's hope we're together
soon. And let's do this again sooner rather than later.
Please.
I hope so. That would be awesome. So great to see you both again. Please keep doing this important work.
Thanks. And you too. And big hugs.
Mwah. Mwah.
And well, cheers to you, Deborah. Thank you again. You are awesome. We love you.
Truly, from the bottom of our hearts and the hearts of our bottoms. I just love the way she made those. And you know what I appreciate, just from a more personal, maybe a little bit more selfish, help me shift some of that stuff in my head. Mm-hmm. She really did put a perspective in there that makes it easier for me. Right? Because it's not, I'm not paying lip service when I say I struggle with some of these things, intellectually.
And, it comes up a lot, but neither one of us likes to admit that there are 3 generations behind us now. And each one defines or redefines things in their
That's right.
own way. And like I said, everything old is new again. And so the most important thing for anyone counseling, especially young people or therapists, is to try and understand what the person we're talking to means by their chosen label, identity, tribe, flag.
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely. And for people in relationships where this has come up, especially if this may have come up when the relationship is already underway.
Right.
I don't think, one of the things I got from what Deb was saying is no matter what, we always have to listen to where they're coming from. We have to understand them.
Yeah.
Right? And I know sometimes in relationships, especially if the relationship already started with one set of expectations and now has to deal with another, don't make it about betrayal. Don't make it about lying. Try to find a way to, I think, discover that common ground.
Yeah.
Right? Because I would be hard pressed to see a relationship like that that is only formed on the basis of the sex.
Of course.
Right.
And I love the way Deb couched it as similar to conversations wherein couples are navigating kink or even the frequency of sex in the relationship, or if one identifies as bisexual and they're making a commitment to be monogamous to the other gender, right? And a lot of these, a lot of bisexual folks mistakenly believe that is, if their outward intent is a wedding vow and a commitment to a monogamous relationship, but they get a free pass because there's half of me that you can't satisfy, so it's only cheating if I'm with another woman. Like, no,
That doesn't work.
Unless that was negotiated right before the wedding.
Right. And that's really the key. I was hearing Susan's voice in my head when we were even talking to Deb at one point. But it's about, let's make a deal.
Yeah.
Right? Let's make a deal. And we also don't want to in any way sound like we're also saying that if you are the non-asexual partner of an asexual person, that it's yours to deal with. But part of this negotiation, part of let's making a deal, is maybe you're going to have to give in on something, and so do they. That also means, and I know this has become not very popular in relationships these days, but that also means that sometimes you do something for the sole purpose of pleasing your partner. That's still got to be part of a relationship. That's still part of the compromise that we have. I'm not always into having sex. If my partner is really into it, then you know what? Yeah, I can give in and do it because she wants it more. That's what a good relationship really is. That's that give and take.
Yeah.
I think one of the things that has really hurt relationships is this idea of, I want it, I'm going to do it. If I don't feel like it, I'm not going to do it. Right? And again, a relationship is about we and us, not about me and mine.
Yeah.
And I think, I worry that we might be moving a little bit too much into that direction again. All right? So hopefully you can find that common ground, do that negotiation, listen to your partner, both of you, all of you, listen to each other and try to find that place of understanding, right? Sharing the intention. Because isn't that what a relationship is? Right? It's a dynamic of shared intention.
Well said. So on that note, why don't we
Call it a wrap.
yeah.
Okay, that'll do it for another episode of Sex Talk with the Siegel Brothers. Join us this and every Friday at 7 p.m.
East Coast time.
East Coast time. And again, please smash that subscribe button, hit the likes on Facebook, share as much as you can, and please comment, question, feedback. We would just love to hear from you.
Smash that button.
Right? So until then,
Good night.
good night, cheers, stay well.
Thanks for watching Sex Talk with the Siegel Brothers. Join us each week on Friday at 7 p.m. Eastern. You can also follow us on Facebook and subscribe to our YouTube channel to stay on top of the latest developments in the ever-changing world of sex and sexuality.